Welcome back. You are on the Q with Q for another episode of Q the Mind. I'm happy to be back in the new year, 2026, first episode of the year. And we have another exciting topic. Took a break for a little while just to really think about the content, go back through some of the episodes that we did. Great review so far. So we're excited to get off with the second half of this series, From Impulsive to Intentional. So today, the name of this episode is When the Pendulum Swings. And so today we're going to just talk about how, behaviors that I noticed from my mom, how the pendulum kind of swung for me, right? And then now as a parent, I'm seeing the pendulum swing all the way back. And so it started when I was young. I remember in the early 90s when the Sega Genesis first came out. My brother was a teenager at the time. I was probably anywhere from like 8 to 10 years old. I believe the Genesis came out in 94, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm an 86 baby. So about 8 to 9 years old. My brother saved up his $99, brought it home. And I remember there being this excitement, but also this state of curiosity because the way that I was raised, video games, TV, any form of worldly entertainment was somewhat frowned upon. And a lot of this just came from a lack of understanding, a lack of knowledge. Grew up very much in a church culture where anything worldly was frowned upon, right? And so here it is. I have this crazy curiosity about video games, and I want to hop on, but there was this gray area with my mom where there was not a very clear idea of what engagement looked like with these platforms. And so anytime that there was availability, there was always something else to do. So my curiosity led me to a place where video games were coveted, but also something that I could not be very open about. And so anytime I played it, it was pretty much, don't want to call it sneaking, but it felt like a place of where I couldn't make it be known. So I'll find myself hopping on the game in times when I knew my mom was busy. She'd be on the phone, or maybe she was not at home at the time. And I'm like, man, I can get a little bit of the game in. Not to mention the fact that my brother gatekeeped it a lot. As a teenage brother, you don't want your things to be misused or mishandled. And so I find myself not being able to engage with it the way that I wanted to. And what tend to happen is that this idea of a pendulum swinging, my mom was so far left on this thing to where like any opportunity that I got, man, I just overindulged myself. I binged. I had a job at Great America when I was a teenager, and I saved my money up. And I remember going to buy the PlayStation 2. This is further down the line, probably a decade later. And I remember buying it and not announcing that I bought it. I had the PS2 in my room, somewhat masked, probably for weeks before my mom even realized that I had the thing. I remember she came in my room. I was playing the game. The volume was down. And here she is like, where did you get this? Like, when did you buy this game? And I'm like, man, I saved my money up. I grabbed it. And so, when I think about that, here I am as a parent, and the new technology is now the iPad. I have a PS5, and my son really does not find much interest in playing the iPad. The PS5. Most of his interest is around this iPad. And I find myself almost being in the same boat as my mom, to where I don't want my son to overindulge in this, right? And so here I am trying to think from my lens of like, how do I find the proper balance? How do I put myself in the middle of where like, hey, I want you to be curious about this. I want you to enjoy yourself. I want you to be able to indulge in your games, but I also want you to have balance. And so what I find myself doing is trying to keep that pendulum from swinging too far, but resting somewhere in the middle. And so that's what brings us into our topic today. And so we're going to go right from that into our 4F formula of fact. What is undeniably true here? And I was looking at a little bit of data, and I wanted to see if there was any positive data that correlated with video game playing, because in my experience, one of the things that allows me to operate professionally the way I do, logistically, and having this ability to kind of handle a bunch of multifaceted tasks all at one time is, I truly believe, comes from my love for open world gaming. Maintaining whatever that story is within the game mode, but also managing the side missions and all the points I can collect and all the different things that I can go do. I'm very drawn to it. And there is data that suggests that the playing of open world games and these types of games builds spatial cognitive function in the hippocampus of your brain. But there's also data that suggests that too much of the video game can also create ADHD. And so I find myself on both sides of this, where video games have truly helped me as a professional, and they still do. I still love them. But I've also found that, yeah, I do suffer from a little bit of ADHD, and trying to maintain that focus is real. So looking into that fact point, the pendulum always is going to swing back, right? And so with my mom, it was far left. With me, it came far right. And here I am as a parent seeing it go back left. And I'm trying to figure out, like, hey, how do I stop that thing and keep it directly in the middle? And so one of the things that are very true is when we overcorrect from fear or guilt or control, it has this way of recalibrating itself, either later in life or, in this case, with the next generation, even with our own habits or that of our children, because they are an extension of ourselves. So my mom's restriction was rooted in care, but that same control created curiosity on my point, and like, hey, I want to dive into this thing. And so that curiosity built resilience, patience, and even strategy around how I'm like, how am I going to interact with this without my mom being all over my back, right? And so the very thing that she wanted to cultivate came to me in the form of defense, in a form of trying to get around this gray area or this gray rule that we had within our home. So that moves us on to fluency. Like, what deeper understanding do we need to develop around this? The deeper truth here is that overcorrection is a response to fear. And we never want to operate from a place of fear. We want to operate from a place of awareness. And so we fear what we can't control many times. And so it's very natural for us to tighten our grip on things. And so wisdom is not found in restriction, but is more found in relationship building. And so if I know that too much of that iPad time can restrict my son, the idea here is to create awareness around that and have conversation and have a relationship with him around this thing. And if I know that this thing could push him to an ADHD place or a place of lack of focus, how am I building his skills to maintain focus, right? And so building that balance, right? And not being that parent that's over restrictive and like, hey, get off of that thing, and it coming from a place of fear or anger, but saying, hey, how do we create these boundaries? So, hey, son, I know you want to be on this, but also we need to make sure that we're building our focus muscle. So tell you what, spend a couple hours here, but then we're going to do this activity over here that's going to help you resharpen and align yourself from a place of focus. And so neuroscience suggests that in early gaming taught an entire generation how to navigate complexity. There were no save points or walkthroughs, only memory, repetition, and pattern recognition. It's funny because when I played the Sega Genesis Sonic the Hedgehog back in the 90s, you had to get all the way to the end of that game and leave the game paused in order to continue on. And, in these days, the game saves automatically every 30 seconds to a minute. So your progress is always managed and you can pick up from where you left off. You can cut off the console. So there is no waiting. There is no muscle building of patience anymore when it comes to gaming. Everything is immediate satisfaction. The dopamine rush has only built up. So we have to pretty much like navigate what that looks like in our young people to be able to build what we didn't have to back 25 years ago or 35 years ago. So today our children, they face the opposite, unlimited lives, unlimited access, no need for endurance. And so the lesson shifts from learning how to fail to learning how to focus. And that's ultimately what I am looking to achieve here with the pendulum swinging is to slow it down from being reactive to seeing what this could potentially lead to and start helping my son balance both sides. So, how do we apply this understanding? And this pushes us into function of the 4F formula. So, first, as parents, we want to guide, we don't want to gatekeep. And so, create boundaries that build awareness and not anxiety. Ask, what lesson can this experience teach? And how can I stay present through it? And so, instead of being so restrictive, many times I ask my son, like, hey, what are you playing? Why do you enjoy this game so much? Are there other games that you play? What is the objective of this game? Helping him just kind of lock in and tell me more about his curiosity so I can find ways to recreate that for him and other methods to support his focus. So, what does this look like as leaders? Balance, structure, and freedom. When we micromanage, we kill creativity, but when we undermanage, we create confusion. So we have to find the rhythm where accountability and autonomy can coexist at the same time. And then as individuals, notice where you're swinging too hard. Is it in emotion? Is it work? Is it in relationship? And from there, moderation isn't mediocrity, okay? It's maturity. So understanding how to just find that balance in all of these aspects is very, very important. The goal isn't to control the pendulum, it's to center your awareness while it moves, right? And so that way it's not swinging so far over here and you find yourself being reactive, or swinging all the way over here. And it's like, whoa, come back. You're aware of where it is and you're finding balance within that back and forth. So we've talked about fact, fluency, and function. Now we move on into freedom. What does this unlock internally for us? So freedom comes when we release the guilt of getting it wrong and embrace the grace of growing through it. That's really all it is. Like, as a parent, this is my first time being a parent, right? It was my mom's first time being a parent. She has 6 kids, but each kid is different, and it's her first time raising each one of them. And so with my son, I have to understand it's my first time, grow through it. Don't beat myself up if maybe I didn't get it right the first time, and continue to support him versus make things operate out of a place of lack or guilt or out of fear. Again, I don't want him to be reactive based on my convictions, but I want him to be curious about why. So freedom comes again when we release that guilt of getting it wrong, embracing growing through it. And then when we stop reacting to our past and start responding from a place of wisdom, we find that balance. The middle ground becomes that sacred ground, and a place where growth, clarity, and peace can all live together. That's what we're trying to achieve here. So we talked about our 4F formula, fact, what is undeniably true. And so again, we'll go back to that point. Overcorrection comes from fear. And while there are some positives and some negatives around video games or any other thing, I'm speaking from a place of gaming, but this could look different for each of your children. Some kids may be heavy on YouTube. Some kids may love watching TV all day or be into their shows. So how are we overcorrecting that from a place of curiosity and learning versus from a place of fear? Then moving on to the function piece, or the fluency piece, what deeper understanding must we develop? Just learning what a good response looks like. Like we've already talked about, overcorrection from fear is not where we want to be, that we want to operate from a place of balance. And then function, how do we apply this understanding? So, we talked about what it looks like as parents from overcorrecting. We talked about what it looks like from a leadership lens and making sure that we're not too far on one end, but we're finding balance within our leadership and supporting of our teams. And then lastly, as individuals, just making sure that whether this is from an emotional place, a spiritual place, a relationship place, a career place, that we're remaining balanced and aware. That's very important. And then freedom. What does it lock internally? Internally is getting rid of the guilt of getting it wrong and growing through it, embracing the fact that this is something that I am unfamiliar with and I have to build the muscle here. So let's move into our concepts. So from a spiritual lens, the scripture that we want to lock into today is from Ecclesiastes chapter 7, 16 through 18. I thought that this was a very good scripture. It says, "Do not be over righteous, neither be over wise. Why destroy yourself?" Verse 17 says, "Do not be overly wicked, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time?" However, it says in verse 18, "It is good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. Whoever fears God will avoid all extremes." So even the word is kind of telling us like, hey, live in balance. Don't go too deeply to one end. Like, don't be this person who's overly righteous and a Mr. Goody Two Shoes or Mr. Know It All, because you will meet destruction. Like, everybody makes mistakes, right? And so you don't want to be that person that always lives in this place of continued righteousness, because when you make a mistake, people are going to be pointing the finger, right? But then at the same end, you don't want to live in a place of being overly wicked and being controversial and pushing against the grain or always causing friction. You want to find your balance. And so the scripture speaks to that. And then from a Robert Greene lens, instead of the 48 laws of power, we're looking at chapter 9 of the human laws of nature, the laws of human nature, where he talks about confronting your dark side, the law of repression. And he speaks about repression being dangerous. What is repressed often returns with double the force. And so this idea of my mom repressing my access, in many ways, it did come with double the force because of the ways that I try to embed myself in it. And so, thinking about that, is not good to repress, but live from a place of curiosity. Now, let's look at what it looks like from an idea of the POS model. Of course, the POS model, we look at social emotional learning, health, spirituality, and academics. These are going to hit the SEL component, the health, and the spirituality component. From an SEL is just simply emotional balance, self-awareness, self-management, just understanding that, if my pendulum is swinging too far to the left, I might be operating from a place of fear. But also you don't want it to just be loose on the other side. You want to find that balance. You want to create awareness and focus. And then from a health aspect, just regulation, right? Because if we do give ourselves over to one side of it, again, I could be promoting that idea of not having focus and ADHD, or from the other end of it, I could be repressing something that could come back tenfold later on. And then spirituality lens is just discernment. Follow that gut feeling. There's always a voice inside of us that will counsel us in the direction that we need to go. And so making sure that we're being open and willing to listen to that voice that will guide you in that way. Okay. And then lastly, we want to look at the personal and the business development aspect of this. From a personal standpoint, reflect on one area of life where you've overcorrected something. It could be in parenting. Could it be within your career? Just simple productivity and what your goals are as an individual in your relationships, right? Ask yourself, what am I trying to correct? And then lastly, refrain from control and push that into a place of curiosity. It helps awareness, and it helps you kind of live in a space of where instead of just determining something, you're asking the right questions for yourself, and you're keeping an open mind. Professionally, audit your leadership balance. Are your systems too rigid or are they too loose, right? Are they too relaxed? And then the healthiest teams mirror balanced leaders. So if you are leading a team, make sure that it's structured enough to sustain and be flexible enough to adapt as needed. Adaptability is very important. And so from a closing lens, as we get ready to shut down this particular episode, I hope it's been helpful. But every generation, every business, every relationship has is pendulum moments, right? And so whether it's back and forth like this, right in the middle, or maybe you're, on a full on swing, right? You know, moments where control meets curiosity, fear meets faith, restriction meets release is where you want to be. Again, moments where control meets curiosity, fear meets faith, and restriction meets release is where you want to be. And if you can stay centered while everything swings, you'll move through life not with resistance, but with rhythm. And that is what we are trying to build here. The whole idea of this is to help people think through their issues, think through their concerns, think through their challenges, and ultimately make better decisions, which will allow you to live within rhythm. And so that is our episode for today. The pendulum always swings back. You're on the Q with Q. I hope you enjoyed episode 5, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one.